today is sex, the love drug. And these young people, I don't know where they get these titles. Sex, the love drug. And Bible passage that we used with it was, let me get it.
2 Timothy 2.
2 Timothy 2:22. I'm going to read it real quick. Okay. Second Timothy 2:22 says, "Flee also youthful lust, but pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace, with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart." Amen. 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 So there's a lot in that, but you're going to get all in the discussion that we're going to have tonight. So I'm going to start with our Papa, and I'm going to throw the first question to him. Young people talk about sex a lot, and for some people, if you say sex, they're going to tell you I'm a male or female. That's not what we're talking here tonight. We're talking about sex, okay? Pastor George, this may be a lengthy question, but what is sex? And is sex evil? And what is its purpose for us?
Okay. Thank you, Pastor Ernest. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. First of all, I don't want to define sex. Maybe as I talk, I'll leave it to the doctors to talk about it more.
Okay.
But from a bigger perspective, sex is not evil. If you look at Hebrews 13, verse 4, it says that marriage is honorable among all things and the bed undefiled. But fornicators and adulterers, God will judge. When I read it, it tells me that sex was made for marriage. Because when it talks about the bed in marriage, I'm assuming it's intimacy sex. So I want to say it is not evil. It is something that is clean. It is pure. God made it a beautiful thing where a man and a woman comes together in a union, which makes them one. It's also for procreation. That's the only way we can reproduce. I know there is IV treatment and all that, but the normal way is before this was discovered, is sex. So it's meant to be a beautiful thing, but like any beautiful thing, it can be abused. There are drugs which can heal, but you can abuse them if you overuse them. If you take above the dosage, it can kill you. The drug that can heal you can kill you. So like anything, you have to know what is its purpose and use it for the right purpose. It's meant by God to bring two people together in a union to express love and intimacy within the context of marriage. That's basically what I would say.
All right, so now I'm coming to the doctors. Dr. Kasi, if from your medical point of view, what would be your definition for sex? And let me add this to it. Are there any dangers as far as young people are concerned?
It's a loaded question. But before I
just give us a brief, we'll come back into the details of it.
Yeah.
I just want you to give us a brief background from your practical point of view.
Yeah, well, before I even start talking, I want to thank Pastor for allowing this platform to occur. I also want to thank you for allowing this platform to occur for the young people. I think it's time that the church took back the conversation, and I hope the young people on this line feel the love and the validation from the leadership, because the information that you're getting out there is no different from the information that you will get in here, but you're doing it with family. So thank you so much for even putting this on the agenda. Okay, so what is sex? There are different types of sex, but suffice it to say that anytime there's intimate contact between a man and a woman, a man and a man, for a woman and a woman. What is intimate contact? They are reproductive organs that females and males have. For the women, there's the breast, there's the vagina. For the males, there's the penis. So anytime any of those are in contact with, oh, and the anus as well. Anytime any of those body parts are in contact with one another, make no mistake, it is sex. I thank you for bringing up that question, because I have many patients who will say, oh, I've never had sex, but they have had oral sex 40, 50 times. Make no mistake that all of those qualify. Just because you've not had penetrative sex, it doesn't mean you have not had sex. So that's the definition. Are there any dangers? Well, of course, not just for young people, but for any and everyone who engages, right? So so the short answer is yes. The reason why it's especially difficult or especially dangerous for young people is that it's harder for them to fix when something goes wrong. With older people, you have more maybe resources, more experience to fix when something goes wrong. The problem with young people is that when something goes wrong, the trouble is bigger because they can't handle it. So that's my answer.
Okay. All right. Dr. Eno, I'm coming to you. Look, these young people, they're sitting back there, they're saying, I'm older than her, I'm older than her. Remember, you're muted, so they're not older than you. You're young, beautiful. My question to you is this. Considering your age, you're not too far away from our young people right now. How would you explain to a young adult sex, and just like Dr. Cassie did, but I want you to take it from the point that when you were at their age, things that you wish somebody had told you sitting here right now that you know, that you want to talk to them about as far as sex is concerned.
I think Dr. Cassie did a really, really, really good job. It was a very thorough description. She described, just intimate touch with any of the organs, including she discussed the reproductive organs, the anus, and she mentioned the mouth. There can be also hand touch contact with those areas as well. I when I was young, I was actually really lucky to have this big sister. She was a friend's big sister, and she gave me the book What Every Girl Should Know, and also What Every Boy Should Know. So I was really lucky to read those books, and reading it, helped you learn about menstruation, helped you learn about kind of some of the thoughts and feelings that you might develop as you get into adulthood and adolescence. I thought that was really helpful. And then, she was a big sister in Christ too, so she kind of guided me in that aspect as well. I think, I don't know, I also did some work on sexual health, like child sexual abuse and sexual assault. And and those are kind of the things, it's more actually vulnerable children, when things happen that you're not comfortable with, just speaking to somebody. I think that would be the thing that I would probably, I wish maybe adults had more conversations about that. I think you're muted.
Sorry, Dr. Samuel, I'm coming to you. So your colleagues have talked about, sex. I want you to add what you want to add on to that. Because I know you're a gang. You say, oh, they've said it all. But I know you have something you want to add on. So please go ahead.
Hello, good evening, everyone. So all I would add to that, so, God made us, beautifully. We are beautifully and we are wonderfully made, right? He also made us sexual beings. So I think as young people, it's important to understand that we are sexual creatures, we are sexual beings, and that is not a negative thing. That is designed by God. Our bodies we were designed for that. And so just using that in the context, which I'm sure we'll go in a little bit deeper, is mostly what's important. And also too, when we talk about, sex, and we talked about the different types of sex, I know a lot of young people don't equate anal sex and oral sex to having sex, because usually sex is tied to virginity. And so, that's another topic. And also too with sex, there's beyond just physical contact or penetration, there's also the conversation of, purity. What type of sexual contact should, you have between a man and a woman. So those are things that I wanted to add. Okay,
thank you. I'm glad you talked about that, because in especially in our African homes, anytime a young man or woman start talking about sex, they say, hey, that's a taboo or something. They don't want to hear that. But you can't tell somebody don't do this and don't explain to them why you're telling them not to do that. So Pastor George, I'm coming to you with this question. Why did God put sexual desires in us at this tender age? When, they are too young to marry, but they have their hormones are raging like, I don't know what. Why would God do that?
Okay. I see it the same as why did God put the tree in the Garden of Eden? The tree of knowledge of good and evil. And I always say, God wants man to choose to love him with his will, not because there is no other option. And sometimes when I talk to newly married people, they tend to feel that because I'm married now, sexual temptation is out of my life. And I said, no, it's not true. When you get married, there will still be sexual temptation. So I believe God put the desire there so we can learn to manage and control it. Okay? So the time between puberty and when you get married, you need to learn the discipline to say no when you know this is wrong, I shouldn't be doing it. To develop that sense of self-control. Even after you are married, if somebody makes an advance towards you who is not your spouse, you should tell the person, no, this is wrong. Because if the desire is not there and you get it just before you get married, then you won't know how to manage it. And so I think we need to have that attitude. I know some young people, when they are going through this sexual pressure, as soon as I get married, it's over. And I said, no, it's not true. There are people there who will still, if you're a woman, they don't care that you are married. They still will pursue you. They still make advances towards you. Maybe your husband may not be as gentle and loving as you want. And a man who is not your husband might, show you that. You need to be able to make that decision that, no, this is wrong. I should depend on my emotions. As a man, it's the same thing. You're going to find women who may be more attractive than your wife, especially as you age. But I still need to be able to have the discipline to say that, no, this is wrong, I won't do it. When I was younger, I had a friend who was married. And one day he told me something, I didn't believe him until I got married. I was getting on his case for committing adultery. And he said, George, you don't understand. You think just because I'm married, every time I want sex, my wife gives it to me. And I said, but doesn't she? He said, no, when you get there, you will see. So you need to have the discipline that just because it's there doesn't mean you have it. Your spouse might travel for a long period. You need to have the discipline. So God put the desire there, so we'll learn how to manage it and have the discipline so that even within marriage, we can still have the discipline. That's what I would say.
Okay. All right. So, Dr. Eno, I know Pastor talked about, the discipline, in one has to have that discipline. Now, coming back to my question, at that young age, the sexual desires is so way up. I just don't get it. What is the medical, thing connected to that? Because it looks as if at a certain age, when you get older, your sexual desires, kind of drops, especially for the men. But in this situation, for the young people, it is so high that how do they control it? And, if you can talk to us about that, please.
Hey, what a question.
Pastor started, please.
I guess the medical thing is just, it's called adrenarchy, and then, menarchy. So you become an adolescent and you become, for women. So we're gynecologists, so we speak from that perspective a lot. But just your hormones, your gonads kind of develop. They start to produce hormones that are in the adult range, and they can cause a lot of emotions. They also cause a lot of changes in your body, including just sexual development. So for women, just getting breasts and getting hips and menstruating and all these things. But you start to notice that you actually look attractive. You look more adult, but you're in almost, it's a transition. So you're in a young person's body, but then you're also kind of having these hormones and things like an adult. And so I think it's a time where it also influences the brain, and depending on the things you've been exposed to, depending on the conversations you've had with your parents and your friends and things like that, and depending on kind of how you want to live your life, you can decide, it can.
I think we lost Dr. Eno. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? What's going on?
We can hear you.
Yeah, I think she's
Dr.
having connectivity issues. We can continue, and then when she comes back.
Dr. Cassie, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so when Eno comes, we'll pick it up from there. But Dr. Cassie, you're a mother, and I want you to put yourself in a situation where your young ones are coming to you and they're telling you, Pastor was talking about the control, having the discipline. And how would you handle that from the medical point of view? What is going to help and what is not helping that causes this rage and trying to experiment and, about sex and all that?
So it's interesting. You mentioned my being a mother, and you used the word, you said rage. They're all connected. I don't think that there's a medical point of view outside of the spiritual point of view, outside of just the development of the individual, right? So what am I raising in my house? You have to control sexual urges, but you also have to control, you're learning to control. Sorry, I think someone. Okay.
Dr. Eno came back. We'll go back to it. Go ahead.
Okay, but you're also learning, you're coming of age in many different ways. It's not just sexually. And I think where it becomes retarded is where we compartmentalize, okay? You're coming of age, even academically in your schoolwork. You're learning how to multitask. You're learning how to control your anger as a man and also as a woman. You're coming into society. So there are many things developing at the same time. The strategy I use in my house, just because of my experiences as a woman, I have 4 sisters, I see hundreds of patients per month. The strategy that I use for my kids, I say, okay, what is the root of it all? The root of it all for us is your identity in Christ Jesus. So everything has to develop within that context. I didn't have that growing up. You asked the question, what do you wish someone had told you? What I wish someone had told me growing up is that you don't have a church life and then a Saturday night life. So it's that dichotomy that I think leads to this tension, leads to this confusion. The sexual urges are natural. So is the urge to slap somebody across the face if they talk rubbish. These are natural urges. But, that's part of, how we mature. So for me as a mother, I say, okay, I can't control, and my children are very different. You understand? One of them will take chances, the other will not. I can't control them. I'll go crazy. So I said, the only thing that can control us all is our relationship with Christ. Ultimately, what are the choices that we'll make? It may not be the perfect choice from the beginning when you're 15 and 16, but as you mature, as a young man, you have to have your personal reason for not doing something. It can't be the reason I told you not to do it. So primarily for me, and for when it comes to development, the root of it, if it is Christ, it makes all these things easier. It really does.
Okay. So Dr. Elo, if you can finish your point, we lost you for a minute. You're muted.
Which part did we get to? I don't know where you lost me.
Anything. Go ahead. Just summarize.
I think I was just saying that it's just a time when you start producing hormones and it affects your brain development, and so it can affect hormones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Samuel, same thing. Please add something to it.
So, I co-sign what Dr. Nyan and Dr. Okasi said, but I think it, all boils down to understanding your anatomy and physiology. So understanding that as a young man or as a young woman, your body is going to go through a series of changes, okay? And, these changes include development of breasts, development of hair, development of certain urges, hormones, and this is normal. And so first of all, understanding that, okay, this is normal. Then also to understanding the consequences of certain actions. So knowing that, okay, I have these urges, I have these feelings. If I give in to these feelings, this is what could happen. So if I participate in sex, unprotected sex, I can get STDs, I can get infections, some of them that can't go away. It can result in, infertility. It can result, even some people, eventually death. So just knowing what it is, the fact that it's normal, and understanding that there are consequences to your actions, I think helps in terms of with the self-control aspect.
Okay. So, Dr. Okasi, I'm going to come to you and then I'll throw it back to Pastor. Okay. You did talk about the fact that there's a need for, I think we did glance through the fact that there's a need for them to have control. Okay, so how do we control or deal with sexual desires? I'm sure some young person is sitting out there. Okay, I understand what you're saying, but how do I control, the sexual desires in my life?
Okay. That's a very good question, because that's where there's a struggle of the flesh. Again, calling it what it is. It's helpful to understand from an intellectual standpoint, what's going on with your body, consequences, etc. But people do these things anyway. In terms of pedigree, I'm Harvard educated. I went to Harvard when I was 17. So in terms of knowledge, we had all the knowledge, but that didn't stop the behavior. So that is something that I want to make clear. This is not something that people who misunderstand are doing. It's an urge. It's lust of the flesh, right? Okay. So as a young person, I wish I had understood it beyond science, okay? The impact. And that's why I thank Pastor and you so much for talking about it in this arena. So we say, okay, if you engage in this behavior under this circumstance, it depends on the age. If you're 16, if you're 17, if you're 18, 19, 20, where are you in your life? What is it going to mean? So for example, unfortunately, I believe the girls, actually no, I know the girls have it worse. So it's easier for us to count consequences for the girls. You're 18, then you get pregnant. That changes everything. one of the ways that people can, I think about sexual desires is think about sexual desires. Think it through. What do you want to do tonight, and what's it going to look like tomorrow morning? Who are you doing it with? Are you confused between sex and love? You know, what are, you know, again, you think it through. You know, challenge yourself to say, okay, one of the strategies I use with my young patients, I say, talk to yourself. Like if you hear your parent's voice, it's like somebody's giving you an instruction. Coach yourself. Talk and say, okay, I have a desire to do this, or I want to, you know, nobody ever says I have a desire to do this. He loves me, or he likes me, and he, you know, he's attracted to me. He's paid attention to me more than the other girls. So obviously I have to do what he wants me to do, right? Well, he obviously likes me better than her. Then there's that false expectation that this is what you're supposed to do. But wait a second, what happens if you do it? So again, think it through. And for young people, I want to encourage you to become your own motivational speaker. One of the things, I don't know why, it just doesn't, you know, this talking to people. I'm a fan of people talking to themselves. Hear your own voice, because if you can talk to yourself in the mirror at home, then when he comes and you're out on a date together, you've heard yourself say those words. Also, listen to other people's stories. They're not making it up. How do you want to end up?
Thank you, man. Pastor, your children are asking. We may be out of control. How do we control or deal with sexual desires? You're muted.
Let me address something on here first. You mentioned that men's sexual desire dwindle when they age.
I knew you were going to talk about that.
I am disputing that these days. I used to believe that until I thought about it and realized that a man is at 60, says his sexual desire is down, so his wife is like his sister now. Yes, he's dating a 20-year-old girl, a 30-year-old girl outside. So what happened? Where did they find the strength for that? So I think it's a matter of corruption of the mind. When a man decides that he is not going to direct his sexual desire in the right direction, but in a different direction. That's why you have all these old men going after young girls, but when they come home, they claim that, you know, they are too weak, and I don't believe it. I don't buy it. So, but let me go to your question. I'll refer first to Daniel. He purposed in his heart not to defile himself. Daniel chapter 1, I think verse 8. That he will not defile himself the king's food. Food, you know, works on your desire just like sex. And I think Dr. Cassie made a very good point there that it's everywhere. It's not just sex. If you isolate that alone, it becomes a problem. For example, I want to control my carbohydrate intake. I want to control my sugar intake. When I go to the store, I'm so determined to do this. You find me reading labels, asking questions before I put food in my body. So it's the same. I have a desire for, I love cake and I love chocolate. Everybody knows that. And I like chocolate, cake with a lot of sugar in it. But now I have purpose in my heart that I don't want to die before my time. It's the same thing. So number one, be determined that you will not defile yourself. Number two, for me, what helped me when I was growing up, I try to think long term, okay? It takes one sex act to have a child with somebody. Once you have a child with somebody, for a woman, yes, pregnancy, but I'm talking more from the view of a man, is the person is going to be in your life for the rest of your life. I told somebody this, they said, no, until the child is 18. But, okay, after 18, child support issues are over. But at the child's wedding, the father and mother of the bride, father and mother of the groom, you have to get up with that person. At their children's birthdays, you have to be there. So sex has long-term consequences. Think about that. The third thing for me as a man also, which helped me, is what I'm doing to that young lady, okay? These are people I consider my friends and so on. And I used to think about it this way. If this person becomes pregnant, I've messed up the education, okay? One day, if they get married, and if you don't get pregnant, and I know I've been intimate with them, if I meet them and they are married, I can never become a good friend of that person and their husband, because I know what I've done with the person's wife. I've stolen from that man. And there's a very interesting scripture in the book of Songs of Solomon, chapter 8. And I want to read that, verse 8. I give it to all of the young men. Songs of Solomon 8, verse 8. It says, we have a little sister. She has no breast. What shall we do for our sister in the day when she is spoken for? If she is a wall, we will build upon her a battlement of silver. If she is a door, we'll enclose her with boards of cedar. So what it's saying here is that we will protect her. Okay, so the young ladies in our lives, whether in church, in school, and if we care for them, we want to protect them. So we don't want to victimize them. And also, the last thing I'll say is this: please, let's be honest about our feelings. Don't try to act spiritual or pretend like it's not there. When I met my wife and we're dating, I had a conversation with her because I knew that I was more spiritually more mature than she is, and she thought I was like some spiritual guy, you know what I mean? So I looked at her and told her, Madam, I'm not coming after you because of your prayer life. Because if people to pray with, I got plenty of them around me. We can pray the rest of our lives.
She was that young and you call her Madam?
Well, no, I didn't say Madam then. But I told her, look, I find you very attractive. And if I get the chance, okay? So please, let's work together. Help me.
Right.
I said, if I ever make a move on you and you say no, and I tell you that if you don't let me, I will leave you, please. Later on, I'll thank you for preventing me from doing it.
See, but that's discipline. You're too disciplined.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
It's discipline. You are honest about it. I saw her, she was attractive, and I knew that if I get my hands on this one, I'm not going to fake it. And we still talk about these things. So let's be honest. Don't pretend as if the sister is there, you are looking at her, you are awesome, and then you are looking at her, you are speaking some tongues. My brother, you are suffering. Let her know. From one time I was at the University of Ghana, she came to visit me with her friend. And the friend said he was going for a walk. She said, no, she won't let the friend go. And I said, why? She said, when I look at you, if he lives here alone, I don't know if it will be safe for me. And she was being honest, because I haven't seen her in a long time. I had a flat to myself because I was a graduate student. And she looked at me based on our conversation and said, no, this guy is going to remain here for my protection. And we laughed about it, but for me, it helps. So let's be honest, and let's not pretend as if we are too spiritual for this to happen to us. Some of those who act so spiritual, I'm telling you, they are the ones who this will happen to.
Okay. All right. So now it's getting hot in here right now. Okay. I'm going to go straight to this. Now I'm coming to you, the doctors, and then once you've given your opinion, Pastor will take this question. Most people want to maintain that virginity, that I'm a virgin, and then resort to masturbation. What is your definition of or what's your understanding of masturbation? And what are some of the dangers of masturbation? So all three of you can give your opinions and knowledge for us to take down, and then Pastor will talk about that. So Dr. Samuel, you can start.
That's an interesting question. Masturbation is essentially the stimulation of one's genital organs, so stimulation of the clitoris or stimulation of the penis by oneself. So it only involves one person, and that person is yourself. So that's masturbation. And usually masturbation is done for the purpose of pleasure. So you're pleasuring yourself. I think the danger that could come with that is the fact that you're pleasuring yourself. So it's more so that principle. Medically, I don't know of any, medical issues with that. But in terms of, psychologically and spiritually, you are putting yourself and your pleasures, at the forefront. So that's what I would say.
Okay. Dr. Eno.
I think Dr. Samuel's answer was really good. So just, touching oneself in a sexual way in order to induce pleasure. It can be the penis, it can be the anus, it can be the vagina, it can be the clitoris. Sometimes it can be the mouth. So whatever organ that is, it could be, sometimes your sexual organs, your breast, things like that. And I would think possible medical things that can happen are sometimes, depending on the tools you're using, sometimes you can get certain infections, especially if you're not careful with taking good care of them. And then what she said about in terms of putting your sexual pleasure first.
Okay. Dr. Cassie.
Okay, well, I definitely agree with the definition. From a medical standpoint, yes, for sure. But I see absolutely nothing wrong with masturbation. I think it's healthy. I think if people want to pleasure themselves by themselves, it's your body, you have dominion over it, fine. In fact, if that will curtail engaging someone else, if that's the purpose it serves, where if a young man absolutely has to do whatever he has to do, I think that's way better than engaging a young woman. So for sure, I have no issues with the concept of self-pleasure or masturbation. I think it's perfectly healthy and normal.
Okay. I think I will not agree with you, but let me go to Pastor. Pastor, go ahead.
Can I add something quick? I think there's the little potential. Again, I'm with Dr. Okasi. I agree with her in terms of it can be healthy. But, and this is what you get when you get gynecologists involved, okay?
We know bringing you on, this is what we're going to face. So.
My goodness, yes. I guess some of the things, the only other thing I might add is sometimes it can become pathological, right? And so people can become too obsessed with it. So I know someone who was married and her husband preferred to masturbate than to be with her. That disrupted their relationship. I know there are people who develop porn addictions.
Okay.
Because of what they need in order to kind of that pleasure. And so it can have other mental and, spiritual consequences and things like that. But there are healthy ways to do it, I guess.
Okay. Dr. Eno, good transition. I'll transition to Pastor. Pastor, you're muted.
Yeah, the way I look at it is, if Jesus said that if I think lustful thoughts about somebody, it is a sin, then if I do acts also, then I think that is also a sin. Always what I'm saying. But if I can't just think the thoughts, like Jesus is saying, if you think look at somebody lustfully, you haven't touched the person, you haven't engaged the person, he says it's a sin. Then if I do an act which doesn't even involve another party for sexual pleasure, then I see that that's even a step higher above just thinking the thoughts. And what Dr. Eno said is also true, because in counseling, I've come across a couple whose sexual life together is completely gone. But the woman constantly finds the man engaging in masturbation, and yes, he will not touch the wife. And that seemed to be creating, a wedge between them. So I think he's got to the point, so he's so addicted to be with himself, he doesn't want to be with his wife anymore. And that creates a big problem. So that's my take on it. Okay.
All right. So we're going to open the lines for anybody who wants to ask a question, but whilst they get prepared, I'm throwing these questions to the doctors. This one, just the doctors. Pastor, I don't think you have any idea on this one. I just was asking about one of my young girls today, and the mother was telling me she had surgery. She's young. She's 23, 24. And I said, well, what kind of surgery? And she said, fibroid. So my question to you is, how come young women at that age are having fibroids, and what can they do to prevent that? Dr. Cassie, you can take that.
Okay. Well, that's unfortunate. I hope she's doing well. There's really nothing
Yeah,
to do.
she's recovering great. Yeah.
Good. There's really nothing to do to prevent fibroids. Fibroids tend to occur to young women. Some women have small fibroids. Some women have larger fibroids. They occupy space on the uterus, so it can cause heavy bleeding, pain. It could also make it difficult to get pregnant, and sometimes it just is uncomfortable by the sheer size. So at the age of 23, having fibroid surgery, that suggests that she was probably having a lot of symptoms. Back to Dr. Samuel's point, though, of paying attention and knowing your body, being in tune with your body's development, right? So you know what's supposed to happen at a certain stage. We enjoy when young women come to see us, even as early as 16, 17, earlier, and then we talk to them and put their female bodies as something that we can explain things to them. So they usually will see symptoms. So there isn't a prevention, but anytime you notice something even slightly abnormal going on with your body, then please reach out either to your primary care doctor. Now, most young women have access to the internet. They can schedule appointments themselves. So we definitely like to get involved when people start noticing symptoms.
Okay. Dr. Eno or Dr. Samuel, anyone who wants to add to it, especially what can they do to prevent these fibroids at this early age? Any dieting or whatever, way of life?
Dr. Okasi mentioned there's nothing that you can do per se to prevent fibroids. I know there's a lot of things in the media and on the internet stating that if you adhere to a certain diet, that will prevent you from getting fibroids, but that's honestly unfounded. So it's important to be a temple of your body. So it's important to eat healthy and to be healthy and to exercise, but there's nothing specific that you can eat or not eat that's going to cause the development of fibroids. There's also genetic factor to fibroids as well. So we know that fibroids are prevalent amongst Black women. Fibroids can also be prevalent amongst some families. So some women are just more prone to fibroids than others. But unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do to actually prevent ourselves from getting them.
Okay. Dr. Eno, you want to add to it?
Estrogen, right, in general, is what contributes to the growth of fibroids. So a lot of those diets out there are just trying to decrease levels of estrogen in people's bodies in general. But medically speaking, we're not taught any diets that people can have that can prevent them. When they develop, sometimes you don't have to do anything with them if you don't have any symptoms. Sometimes you have to remove them, depending on what you're doing. So they don't always cause problems.
Okay. All right. So the floor is open. If anybody has a question you want to ask, please go ahead. Okay, Pastor, whilst you're getting ready with your questions, so I'm sure one of the young people is saying, yes, I had all that, but I've had sex. What next? How do I handle that?
First of all, the fact that you have sex doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. When we were young, there was somebody we looked up to, and all of a sudden he was not coming to church anymore. We went to visit him, and he said he's committed an unpardonable sin. And we're like, what is that unpardonable sin? And he said he's committed fornication. And it's very interesting. That old man, we were sitting there trying to tell him that no, it can't be. There is no sin that God cannot forgive. The Bible is very clear that if we confess our sins, He's faithful and just to forgive us and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. David was a man who sinned against God by sleeping with somebody's wife and even having that person killed. Yes, the God forgave him. I think when it comes to committing a sin, your response to the sin is more important than even the sin that you have committed. The danger that I see sometimes when people fall into sin is that instead of accepting responsibility, they tend to blame other people. Most of those I see who have fallen into sexual sin, once they admit their fault, they go to God. God forgives them. He cleanses them. You need to commit yourself to prayer so that the last prayer, like the door has been opened, does not continue, and you don't continue the relationship. That's what I would say. So repent truly. You know what you did wrong to cause it to happen. Avoid doing it again. And God, by His grace, can forgive you. There is no sin that cannot be forgiven, especially sexual sins. I don't know where people got that impression that once you commit that, you are finished. It's not true. God forgives. He cleanses. He can give you strength if you come to Him with true repentance. And you'll be forgiven, and build your life and go ahead. Don't let it define you. I've even spoken to people who have become pregnant out of wedlock, and I've told them that is not the end of your life. You can still pick yourself up. God forgives and God restores. If you look at the life of Saul and the life of David, in terms of sexual sin, Saul was better than David. Because David had a right heart and attitude towards God after his sin, he did better overall than David. So that's all I would say. You can always pick yourself up and be honest, admit your fault. And I tell people, when you want to know how to repent from sexual sin, look at Psalm 51, which David wrote when he sinned with Bathsheba. He admitted his sin against you, and you only have I sinned. And my heart is not right. Cleanse my heart. My heart is unclean. Deal with your issues of lust. Admit it. And so on. And God will help you out of it.
Okay. Do we have a question out there?
There are a lot of questions in the group chat. It's getting really heated in there.
Okay.
I asked a question about sex being painful.
Okay. Dr. Samuel, since you repeated that question, if you can go ahead and say what you want to say on that.
I think someone wrote, sex seems painful and I'm kind of scared for my first time. So I have no idea how old this person is, but in terms of pain and sex, so sex should not be painful. There's many different...
Dr. Samuel, before you go on, as a matter of fact, let me ask you, in addition to that, what are the dangers of having sex at that young age? What does it do? I mean, like at the age that one shouldn't be doing that, and if you can talk about the dangers of to the system itself.
So I guess for young people, adolescents, the dangers of having sex in terms of their body. So especially if you don't quite know how your body works, you could, possibly injure yourself. You can increase your risk for getting infections. Hygiene is also important in regards to that. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Dr. Kasi or Dr. Eno, you want to chime in?
In terms of dangers, the injury, like there are people who cause injury, like they get bad tears sometimes if they're too young, and especially if there's too much force used. But not like it's not always physically dangerous. It's more about risk-taking behavior and the kind of things that people expose them to. So most young people aren't very careful. They don't use protection. They, from our job, from what we see, some people have multiple partners, things like that, and they develop sexually transmitted infections. I mean, and the infections can include urinary tract infections, but also just sexually transmitted infections that can maybe sometimes affect your reproduction later on in life, can cause pain and things like that. So, but that's not just young people. It can also happen to anybody who's not careful, who's not, healthy, and who takes a lot of risks.
Dr. Kasi, can you talk about affecting your reproduction later on in life? How is that?
Okay. I agree with what both of my colleagues have said. I mean, I've had 13, 14-year-olds. In fact, this one 14-year-old I had a few years ago, I saw her and she came, I did some testing and she had 3 sexually transmitted diseases. She had chlamydia, she had gonorrhea, and she had herpes. Just for the record. So some of these infections we can treat. And for those of you listening, what are sexually transmitted diseases? They are germs that go from person to person, and some of them can have real consequences. So like Dr. Eno said, this is my young lady, she had chlamydia. Okay, so I gave her antibiotics. She had gonorrhea. I gave her antibiotics. But herpes, there's no fix for that. You have that for the rest of your life. Okay, and sometimes, in this case, she came in to see me. I was able to treat her. Sometimes young people don't come in because, remember, we said they don't have the resources to fix the problems. And then the infection lingers on in the body, and then the body tries to heal itself, and then there's inflammation, and then it can block the passageway to form a baby. So when you finally get married, 26, 36, you can't get pregnant because your tubes are blocked. This is because of something you did when you were a teenager. So that's a huge price to pay, but it is what it is. With an infection like herpes, which some people have, every now and again, they develop like painful blisters around the genital area. For a lot of people, it makes them sad because then they feel like, oh, nobody's going to be with me anymore because I have herpes. And for the most part, that may or may not be true, but that's the way people feel. The one thing I wanted to say is infections, yes, that's definitely a risk, and you have to be careful. But what's happening now is we have people who are going to college, right? And you don't know that that guy on the football team or in your biology lab class, you don't know that when he was born, his mother had HIV, and so he was born with HIV. So what we're seeing now more, or at least I have seen it. In fact, I had a patient who went to college, and she was dating this guy. Nobody has HIV or
written on the forehead.
written on their face. So you don't know.
Yeah.
So she developed HIV. She didn't tell her African parents because she was afraid they were going to kill her. So so it's things like that that actually concern me because it was a mistake. But sometimes these mistakes we pay for the rest of our lives. So in terms of affecting your body, some things can be fixed, some things cannot be fixed. The one thing that is interesting is pregnancy. Okay, all of a sudden, a colleague of mine found out her daughter was 15-year-old daughter was pregnant with twins at 36 weeks. Okay. So these are the kind of things, the heartaches that, yes, you cause it to your parents, but more importantly to yourself, okay? Because you get scared, you run away, but the perhaps one of the biggest change for the women is pregnancy. And then when you hide it and hide it and hide it and no one knows, well, you will be a mother at 17 or even 22, but you're not ready. So these are the things that, again, we want to always imagine that it can happen to us, because if we think it can happen to us, these stories that we're telling, these are real people. Okay, so consider that this is not really where you want to be.
Okay. Anybody has a question out there?
Yes. I think that there are a lot of questions in the group chat. So if you can go in and start asking them so that no one's questions will be missed.
Okay. Let y'all put them together and we'll start asking them. Whilst we're doing that, Pastor, let me ask you this. About soul ties. And maybe you can combine them. Some young people talk about the fact that they are addicted to sex. I don't know what you're talking about, but
Can I answer this question?
How do you overcome sex addiction and this thing called soul ties? What it means to young people?
Okay, within marriage. There's no question for you, Yvette. Should I ask?
Yeah, can you mute yourself, please? Pastor, go ahead. Pastor, you're muted. Okay.
Like any other addiction, is where you become dependent on something. In fact, it's not just chemicals and drugs that people become addicted to. I think there are people who are addicted to gambling, and so on. Because when they gamble, they get a high, sort of. And so, and like any other addiction, I'm saying at the beginning of the solution to your problem is admit it. Because people who have addictions tend to lie a lot. They won't admit it. Once you admit that it's a problem, then you need to be willing to be helped. I think I don't know if there are psychologists who can help you with sex addictions, but soul ties, I think, is a little different from that. Soul ties, I think, refers more to the place in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, where it talks about the fact that when you sleep with somebody, or when you lie with somebody, when you are joined to somebody sexually, you become one spirit with that person, or one body with that person. You see, what God meant for sex in marriage is that a married couple, through the intimacy of sex, become one. That is what it's meant for. So if you go around and then you have sex with a lot of different people, you're becoming one with all of them. So it gets to a point where that intimacy with that person becomes so attached to that person, then you can't break away and live your own life. And spiritually, that is what is called soul ties. It can be an emotional thing, where, for example, the first person you have sex with, it was so good, that person is still on your mind. So later on in life, you get married and your mind still goes back to that person. I hope you get what I'm saying. So this is what soul ties is about. So, and it can be a very complex thing. I met a young lady who, for example, was telling me, in fact, she told me somebody she was very, very attracted to. Didn't admit she has had sex with the person. But later she told me after she got married that when she's having sex with her husband, she thinks about somebody else. And I asked her, is it that person? And she said, how do you know? Yes. And I said, you do have sex with him. And she was shocked that I made that deduction. She said, well, I don't want to admit it, but it happened. It's my big secret. But now that you said it, I said, look, the Holy Ghost, don't reveal this to me. But I just put 2 and 2 together. And I assume that saying that person, you had that thing with them, So sexual intimacy creates a relationship. It creates a bond sometimes. If you're not careful, it can affect you in your future, It's the same with pornography. If, for example, you watch it and you see people with different types of bodies doing all kinds of stuff, then you come in and your wife's body is different. I'm speaking from the perspective of a man. Your wife's body is different. Your wife cannot do all the things they do in the pornographic movie. Then you think that she's boring, she's not exciting. So that begins to affect your relationship with your wife.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so we need to be careful, because the more you get involved in sex, you're having multiple partners, it kind of becomes very confusing for you emotionally at some point, where you don't attach. For example, those who get involved in like prostitution, where then they begin to have sex and there's no emotional attachment to it. They become dead to the emotions of intimacy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Docs, anybody wants to add to that? Then we start with questions that are coming from. And Sako, please get ready to. Anybody want to add to that?
It's not really, I think it was part of what Dr. Okasi was saying, in terms of some of the young woman who had a partner who had HIV. I think, we're having these conversations here, and we really hope that people are very careful. They wait to choose the partners that they decide to lie with. Like they wait. It is ultimately better. But for those who don't, right, the things that Dr. Okasi was saying made me think of the conversations that people need to have with people before they actually lie with them. And it can be life, but people just need to be honest. And a lot of people get tested for STDs. They show each other the paper before they lie with somebody, and so those are some things that people can do to try and minimize their risk of getting some of these infections. Know what people have. And sometimes you can tell them, I won't judge you if you have it or whatever, And sometimes it might make them more comfortable to share it with you so that you actually know what they've been exposed to in the past so that you can actually protect yourself. Because a lot of people are getting a lot of infections out there. I think one of the things that strikes me with people who have intercourse really early is that like young people switch so quickly. They have a boyfriend for 3 months, they have another boyfriend for 3 months, and so on. And so it just adds up really quickly.
Yeah.
And so anyway, just to be careful, just have these questions. And I think it was part of what Dr. Okasi was saying. It's just, I don't know, it's a complex topic. So now
they want to trend.
It's a very different world we are all living in, even us, the young doctors. It's very different because, it's now people, 12-year-olds.
Yeah, but it's dangerous. It's dangerous.
It's very interesting.
I'm glad you guys are talking about. Dr. Okasi, you want to add to?
Honestly, we're not judging you as your gynecologists, as your doctors. Like at this forum, we're all doing our Christian thing. But if you do have safe spaces, where you can go and talk to someone and they will talk to you and advise you and things like that and hopefully point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
Also, very quickly, too, I want to tell women that young ladies, you hold the power, right? So you do not have to allow any man that wants access. You do not have to allow any man access to your body, to your, to inside of you. So I would say choose carefully.
I think Dr. Okasi touched on it, and it was like sometimes the reasons why girls, especially when you're young, decide somebody loves me is just because they're giving you attention or something. It's very, very small, and that's the difference between doing it younger versus doing that when you're older and you're more mature and kind of maybe know more things to look for, more attributes. To really test their character and things like that. So it just makes you make maybe hasty decisions that you might regret later.
Okay. All right. Hey, do we have any question out there, please? We're ready.
We do have a lot of questions. And if you still have questions, you can still put them in. So I think the first question will be, so the question is, at what age would you recommend young women to start getting pap smear? And does one have to be sexually active before they can get a pap smear?
Dr. Okasi, you want to start with that?
So the pap smear is screening for cervical cancer. So officially, we don't start until age 21. But what most people call a pap smear is just when they come in to see the gynecologist and we do the exam and we do STD testing. That's an interesting question. I welcome all young women once they start their periods. Why? Because issues come up and I want them to come to my office. I want them to know where they can come to ask their questions about their bodies. It doesn't even have to be about a pap smear. Okay, for a woman who might be 18 and sexually active, we need to check to see, are there any infections that are going on? Do we need to talk about birth control? Do we need to talk about why are we even doing this to begin with? One thing I want to touch on, you'd be surprised how many girls, and for the young ladies on this chat, on this session, you'd be surprised because I actually taught sex ed for high school for a year. But one thing that was a surprise to me was how many young girls are actually being sexually active against their will. In other words, they're doing it because they are expected to, either by their friends or by this guy who has paid attention to them. So all of a sudden, it's like you are being pushed into this world that honestly, if you would have been okay just being his friend without all this additional stuff. So for me as a physician, as a doctor, the younger, the better. I have patients, after all, I have a 14-year-old with chlamydia, gonorrhea, and herpes. So the earlier a patient comes in, I welcome, I just want to even hear your voice. I want to hear your concerns. The pap smear is cervical cancer screening. Your risk of cervical cancer goes up, with age. We start 21. But even before that, there may be other reasons that will bring you to see one of us. And we want to see you. We do.
Okay.
The only thing I would add to Dr. Okasi's response is just that some people with HIV require pap smears a little earlier as well.
Okay. All right, y'all. Next question, please.
Okay. So I think the second question will be, at what age should one get the HPV vaccine and their precautions? That's how the question was.
Age 9. For the HPV vaccine, age 9. We start at age 9.
Okay. All right, y'all.
All the way
Okay,
up
Go to the
to
next.
45.
Dr. Samuel is saying something.
No, I said it can be given all the way up to age 45 now. And it's indicated and recommended for both boys and girls.
Okay. All right. So I was going to say we're leaving the boys out, you know, so I'm glad you said that. So y'all go get your HPV vaccine. Go ahead with the next question.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, sorry, can I add to that? So CVS, you don't even have to go to your doctor's office. CVS actually has made it easier. If you want to get the HPV vaccine, you can just go to CVS. They'll give you all 3 rounds of the vaccines. It's very accessible.
I mean, seriously.
If you miss a dose, you can also just, go at any point and finish the course.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, y'all, go ahead. You're confused now, but go ahead.
So I think this is, I don't know if it's a question or a statement. So person says, please talk about abortion and effects. If young girls get pregnant, what is the right thing to do? What are the resources out there for young pregnant girls? I know we don't encourage pregnancy out of wedlock, but what happens if it happens by mistake?
I'll have Pastor handle that question, and then I'll throw it back to the doctors. Pastor.
I personally think that when one gets pregnant or wedlock, the first resource should be your parents. But unfortunately, I know for many parents, they won't handle it well. In fact, before I became a pastor, I used to teach in a youth ministry. And I had 2 cases where young girls got pregnant and came to me. And I took them to the parents. And I told the parents very clearly, if you want to kick them out, let them pack their stuff, I'll take them home. Because if the child comes to you, the parent, for me, I think that alone should make you congratulate and thank them. They could have gone somewhere to some back alley, have an abortion and died. Or even if it was successful, how do you want to find out a few years after your child had a pregnancy and terminated it without your knowledge? So I wish parents were here. But we should be, it has happened. The child has come to you. The first thing I would do, I'll thank the child for coming to me and not going to somebody else. And then you stand with the child. And let me tell you, I'm a pastor, but listen to me very carefully. Pregnancy is not a sin. The act that leads to pregnancy is what the sin is. So if somebody had premarital sex and he didn't get pregnant, it's no better than somebody who had premarital sex and got pregnant. And a lot of times, those who got pregnant is because they are ignorant, maybe their first time they didn't use birth control. So, and I think unfortunately the church has blown this whole pregnancy thing out of proportion, where once you get pregnant, they want to crucify you. And I think it's wrong. And for all of you as adults, Pastor Ernest, doctors, and any adults on there, when somebody gets pregnant, please let's support that person. Let's rally to them. And let me share this with you, real testimony. When it happened to my daughter, the way I handled it, one lady came to my office, she was in tears. She said, Pastor, I wish you were my father. Because she has a secret. When she was about 18, she got pregnant. And because of what was done to her older sister when she got pregnant, she aborted that thing secretly without her parents' knowledge. And now she's in her 40s and has no child. Then sometimes I sit down and I imagine what my child would have been like. I wish my father were like you because I'll have had a child today. So when it happens, let's be bold. And I want to tell the young people, it happens to you, you are afraid of your parents, come see me, okay? And I will stand with you and we'll go through. If they throw you out, I'll bring you to my house here and I'll take care of you. Amen?
Amen. So doctors, I want you to speak on the Pastor talked about the effects of having an abortion. So if you can pick on that.
Well, I would like to speak, to the options, right? So, Pastor talked about going to your parents, and I completely agree with him. If that were the case, I don't know if all parents guide their children. When it comes to opinions, it's just opinions. But not all parents will actually even say that they shouldn't abort the child. So some parents make their children abort the pregnancy. And then some parents help them. But there's also the option of adoption. So you can actually, if you want, there are a lot of people who want babies who can't have them. And so it's also a resource. It's something that is out there. And then I'm sure that there are resources out there for pregnant teen moms. And so that people can look into to help them through the process. And of course, your gynecologist, your friendly neighborhood gynecologist. In terms of the dangers of an abortion, it depends on, it's such a loaded topic. It's so sensitive, and we all have really sensitive emotions. We all have a lot of emotions about it. And a lot of times it's emotional, right? And so it's just kind of it's a heavy decision for people to make. And when they make it, I think they live with it for the rest of their lives. I don't think it's easy for anybody who makes that decision when they do it. But some of the dangers that I can speak to, I think there's some people who are, like in our field, we see this, some people who are serial aborters. And so they abort pregnancy after pregnancy. That's what they use for birth control. And sometimes they can get scarring in their uterus that can make it difficult for them to menstruate and get pregnant later on. Sometimes they can get scarring in their tubes that can make it difficult for them to get pregnant later on. Sometimes it can lead to problems when you get pregnant where the pregnancy grows into the muscle instead of where it's supposed to grow into. And sometimes it can make them miscarry because they or have preterm deliveries or labor because their cervix is too weak because it just kept getting dilated, but it's for those who do it over and over and over and over again. Especially. It can happen after one, but it tends to happen after people who do multiple. And then, of course, infections. It's a procedure. So infections are always part of it, and you can always get injuries. You can always bleed to death. You can always, we don't want to scare you, okay? But these are things that can happen, and it can lead to losing your uterus and so on. But a lot of it is emotional. I would say psychological. It's very, very heavy. So before you get pregnant, it's really better to use birth control. Just my little plug. And some people use Plan B is good emergency birth control. You can always, if you do something without thinking ahead. Birth control is not bad, and that comes later on. So I'll let people.
I can sense the pain, even as professionals and as OBGYNs, the connection that you have today, and I can sense the pain in your voice, even talking about it. So we just want to let you know we appreciate you doing this. Dr. Samuel, Dr. Cassie, you want to add to that?
I think Dr. Diane did an excellent job of summarizing that. I don't have much to add. I would just co-sign and say that it's a very personal decision. It's an irreversible decision, and you do have choices. Just, find somebody, hopefully, that you can talk to, whether it be your parents or somebody trusted. There are other resources out there, other organizations. You can reach out to your, OBGYN or your primary care physician, and they can steer you in that direction. I also wanted to just touch briefly on the Plan B, which Dr. Nyanin mentioned, which is an emergency contraceptive medication that you can take within 3 days of having unprotected sex. I know some people can get mixed up and think that this is an abortion pill, and it's not an abortion pill. It's a pill that's used to prevent the sperm and the egg from uniting and coming together. So there is that. And then, prevention is key. So that's all I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to add is I think I do get frustrated with some patients, especially with this African culture. There's so much, it's like we're competing with, what do you call it? Old wives' tales versus, how do we protect our sisters, our daughters? When you say birth control, everybody is up in arms. But but then the same family, you still can't announce the pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, and that for the young people who are listening to me, please, and that's why we like to see you in our offices so we can speak to you directly. You have access to the internet, you have access to the information, right? But let's take it back to when I do contraceptive counseling for all young people that come to my office. The first and most perfect way of avoiding this is avoiding this, right? So abstinence is always part of our tool, safeguarding ourselves. But I don't want it to be lip service. I don't want it to be in my mouth or in your mouth. I want it'll work better for you if it's in your heart. And that's where we get back to what we were talking about an hour and a half ago, where if we separate our spiritual lives from our sex lives, then then we heighten the war between the flesh and the spirit, right? Okay.
Right.
Be that as it may, if you are big and bold enough to engage in sex, then please be big and bold enough to engage in birth control. People say they don't want any hormones in their bodies. Well, a pregnancy growing in your body is a whopping dose of hormones, okay? Pregnancy prevention actually doesn't have to be with anything hormonal. We have non-hormonal forms of birth control. So the issue of whether or not to have an abortion shouldn't really come up. It does. I know that it does. But I want to encourage these young girls. You're smart, you're intelligent, everybody can talk. Well, let's use that courage, that fire to protect ourselves. And you want to do adult things, well, be a big girl. It's Dr. Enos said, with having an abortion, for the most part, is it a safe procedure? The short answer is yes. But the emotional cost of it, and that's the first thing she said before she started talking about the medical. The emotional cost, even if you're 21 now, for years to come, because these are the things that patients share with us, right? And I agree with Pastor. I've had patients who they had an abortion, or maybe they gave away a child for adoption or something, and now here we are in our 40s. Let me tell you about IVF. IVF is no guarantee. There is no guarantee. Then we have to deal with infertility. So these are mistakes that, you can't afford in your life. So please think about, number one, abstinence. But number two, if you're going to do it, then do it like a smart, intelligent girl. So we don't have to suffer in the future.
I would just like to add that, and that was excellent. I would just like to add that, the boys or the males should also kind of, because sometimes they pressure the women not to use the contraception.
Okay. All right, Yao. The next question, please.
Okay, so I think one thing I will say is the men, we need more questions from the men. It looks like all the questions are coming from women, even though they are anonymous, I know.
Is it the vaccination that you have to go get that is making you go ahead with the question?
The men are not asking questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so talking about birth control, there's a question about birth control, and is it okay to use birth control to help control your period?
Absolutely. Yes, it is. It is okay. And in fact, for some patients, it's preferable. A girlfriend of mine, her daughter is into sports, heavily into sports, but she has these devastating periods. And her mom was saying, but when we grew up, we didn't have these problems. And I said, listen, that's the wrong attitude to have, because that's not helpful, right? She's not in school. She's throwing up. She's rolling on the floor. Do you think this is a performance? Mothers, it's not a performance. Your daughter is in pain. And for me, at least in my house, anything that will prevent you from doing well in school or doing your homework, I would give you whatever you need, but you must do well in school and you must do your homework.
Come on, Dr. Okasi.
I don't care. You must. But the reality is that, and for some of these girls, I remember one day we were at church in Agape, and Pastor was saying something about, difficulties in life or something. He was preaching, and for those of us adults, we're thinking about real life difficulties. And then we were supposed to be praying. So I nudged my daughter. Then she was 13. And I said, she seems so serious. I said, what are you praying about? And she goes, just asking God why my periods have to be so painful and so difficult. I was so touched. On the one hand, I thought, your one chance to talk to God and that's all you have to say. But on the other hand, I said, wow. One of the things that African women, African parents underestimate is that these children are they're not like that. They're fragile and it's okay. But the thing that's going to cause your child's psychological unrest, is it worth it? Okay, so they're in pain. Are you happy? Give them a low dose, and sometimes, my colleagues can tell you, we can give them a low dose pill. We're not committing them to it for the rest of their lives. We can do it for 6 months. We can do it for 1 year, especially the younger ones until they get familiar. First of all, they don't suffer like how we suffered. So you just throw them into this thing for 7 days a month. That's 25% of her life. So in my professional opinion, and as a mother, it is absolutely okay. I have no problem. Now, of course, there are medical reasons why it may not be an option for that particular patient. That's a separate issue. What I'm addressing is our cultural taboo. When we hear birth control pills, it means, oh my God, the child is having sex. That's not fair. That's not fair to our daughters. So.
Okay.
Can I chip in here on this issue?
Sure, Dr. George.
Birth control is okay. Birth control is good. I just want to chime in and say, yes, I agree with them. Okay. Abortion is where the baby is formed and you get rid of it. Birth control, you are preventing the sperm and the egg from coming together. God said we should be fruitful and multiply. Yes, till Adam did not have a dozen children. Abraham himself, the father of nations, was meant to have one child. He had more than that. So the issue is, I don't know this taboo, birth control taboo among Africans, where it comes from. When I do marriage counseling, I talk about birth control. I talk about sex, and I say, if you're going to talk about sex, let's talk about birth control. We say, oh, Pastor, you're going to talk about birth control? We didn't think that was, I said, what are you talking about? There's one young lady who got married. She doesn't come to our church, and she was very close to me, so we used to talk a lot. And there was so much stress in their relationship because the husband was a pharmacist. He knew the side effects of birth control, wouldn't let her take it. And yet still, they're always running from each other, trying to run so they don't get pregnant. And because he was in pharmacy school and he didn't want to have a child before then. So I suggested, why don't you just go buy condoms and have a wedding? Who, me? Go to the shop to buy condom? So, well, just stand at the counter. The condom. What's so big about it? He said, no. He has to get it. So I just, by jokingly, I said, what will happen if you go to buy a condom in the store and as soon as you are taking it, your pastor calls you he's standing in the line behind you, said, oh, I'll die. Why would you die? If your pastor sees you buying condom, you're a married woman. For goodness sake, you don't want to get pregnant and you want to have sex with your husband. What's the big deal? So we need to re-educate ourselves on some of these things. And for example, we're talking about some people in Ghana we call kayaye. They are like street women who do chores in the streets, and they sleep outside. And a lot of rapes were happening. So a lot of them were becoming pregnant. And I proposed to some Christian mission organizations that maybe we should think of giving them the female condoms to cut it down. Oh, come and see. Oh, no. Christians can't get involved in that. But they are getting unwanted pregnancy from rapes. So what exactly is the problem here? So a lot of this, we need to re-educate ourselves. But birth control, please, let me back the doctors up. There's nothing wrong with it. If you have issues with your hormones, like they say, your period, and the doctor prescribes it, don't hide it. you know you are not doing anything wrong. So why do you want to worry about what people would think that you are taking birth control pills? Thank you.
Dr. Samuel?
Yeah, get up in arms with the name. So because it's birth control in the name. So birth control, really all it is a hormonal sort of medication. And so that can be used for contraception, that can be used to regulate your periods or your cycles. It can be used to decrease or improve your acne. It can be used to help with unwanted facial hair growth. I mean, there's many different causes for hormonal medications. And so we should look at it more so as a medication, more of a medical standpoint than just kind of hearing the birth control aspect and like automatically thinking that, this just means that, my daughter or son is having sex and so it's a taboo thing. So just go find it.
Okay, Yao.
Okay. So the next question is about vaginal care and hygiene. Someone says, what are the do's and don'ts of vaginal care and hygiene?
Dr. Samuel, you want to start with that?
So with do's and don'ts in vaginal hygiene, I think I also saw another comment somebody wrote about the vagina smelling like peaches and berries. So one thing I would say is that, the vagina is a muscular organ. It's also, it's very interesting in terms of how God designed us. So we have to be careful as to what we put around it, what we use around it. So the vagina has a natural smell. Okay, and that smell is not a smell of flowers and berries and all that sort of stuff, but it's a natural smell that may have a little bit of a scent to it or musk, but it shouldn't be something that's foul smelling. Okay, so that's one. In terms of, with hygiene, I would say be careful with what you use to wash yourself with. So really all we need to use is just water. So you can use just, a wash rag and water. You don't need to have soap and put soap inside the vagina because it actually can throw your pH balance off. It can, kill off sometimes the good bacteria, which could then, cause more issues. It can give you other problems such as having certain type of bacterial infections. So I would say be careful about the type of products that you're putting there, particularly scented products. There's a lot of wipes that are out there now, vaginal wipes, which, I think if you wanted to use just around the skin, that's fine in terms of cleansing, even around the time of your cycle. That's a time in a woman's life or in a woman's time period of the month where she's at increased risk for infections, where she can more notice an odor at that time. And so you may feel a little bit more icky. So you can use different wipes, around the vaginal area, but you don't want to put anything that has a lot of fragrances and dyes right in the vagina. And then, and I'll let Dr. Akasi take over from there.
Okay, just to piggyback on what she was saying, I don't know who asked the question or why it was asked, but I'll go ahead and say that for the older women older and younger women who are listening, there are times where you have a sense that things are not right down there. And again, we would love to see you in the office. Like if you're confused about what you see, we'd love to see you in the office. I can't tell you how many times I've had older married women come in and what they're observing is actually a sexually transmitted disease. And I'm talking about Christian women, by the way, whose husbands serve in the church. Okay, so I'm not talking about space aliens or the bad people. I'm talking about us. Okay, the women come in and I've run the test and it comes back and this is what it is. So we have to keep our eyes open. If it looks abnormal and you can't figure out what it is, please come in so that we can fix it. Okay.
Okay. Pastor, there was a question. There was a question that I want to throw to you. Somebody was asking whether oral sex is okay.
Why don't you start with the doctors? Because I'll only be quoting doctors.
Okay, Dr. Akasi, you want to start with this one. I know you had talked about the herpes and all that, but go ahead.
So again, it's not a word to be, I don't think sex is a word to be used outside of context. It's like alcohol. Is alcohol good or bad? Is sex good or bad? Any kind of sex. I don't distinguish between types of sex. This is intimacy, right? So if it's you and your husband, this is just my personal opinion. I have no medical or religious or any, basis for it. If it's you and your husband, as you see fit. The challenge that we're having is young girls in high school going around performing oral sex on little boys by the dozen. That is a major issue that bothers me deeply for so many reasons, because the girls walk away and they feel like they've been used. They feel like they've exposed themselves. They feel embarrassed. And I feel bad, obviously, when they come and tell me, because they thought maybe they had something special with this guy, or the guy paid attention to them and it made them feel worthy in a space where they otherwise wouldn't. And so then they do what he says to do. Or sometimes the 17-year-old boys will literally say to them, this is what I want you to do. And because girls are naturally nice, they want to please, and then they something in them dies in that act. So again, it's all about context. For the younger girls, they are scared to have regular penetrative vaginal sex, right? But with oral sex, it's like, oh, what's the big deal? Let's just do it quickly. That's the stuff I want to encourage ladies. Girls, I want you to be strong and don't put yourself in that position. You know why? Because you're going to regret it. You're going to feel so bad about it. If he's not your boyfriend, he's not your boyfriend. Don't expose yourself to stuff like that. So again, oral sex, who are the two players?
Dr. Samuel.
I just wanted to add, as Dr. Okasi mentioned, so oral sex is just an extension of sex in general. So you have vaginal, penile, penetrative sex, and we talk about using condoms for that. But even for oral sex, you have to remember that you can, for our ladies and our men, that you can get infections from oral sex as well, such as HPV or such as oral cancer. So it's important to use protection or use some sort of barrier when performing, if you're performing those acts as well.
Dr. George.
Yeah, that's why I said I was going to quote the doctor, because the Bible is silent, the Bible is silent on it. And most of what I've read about it is really doctors talking, and they have different opinions. Those who are against it, one of their major issues is the HPV issue, where the HPV is found to be with the cervix and also in the mouth, throat, when people have. So they kind of link the two, and they think that there's a risk there. So it's doctors that I'll be quoting. That's what I said. And there are some doctors who are for it, and there are some doctors who are against it. So but the Bible is silent on it.
Okay. All right. I'm not going to touch that. Next question, please.
Well, I think it's okay. I think it's okay for us to have a position, because it's an epidemic in our high schools. So I think it's okay for us to take a position that, ladies, you don't have to do it, okay? You don't have to do it. Practice saying no and see it as a belittling of yourself. You don't have to do it, okay? So.
Thank you, Dr. Okasi. Thank you for saying that. I'm glad you said it, you have a question?
Yeah, I think this next question is pretty good. I think the question is, why are survivors of sexual assault usually not believed in the Black community? How can we create a society that normalizes believing the survivors of abuse or assault?
This one, everybody's in on this one. So whoever wants to start.
I don't think it's just the Black community. That's all, I think it's in all communities.
Is that Dr. Eno?
Yes, I'm driving.
Okay, all right.
I think it's in all communities, and for whatever reason, maybe because of shame, maybe because it's easier not to believe people, maybe because there's not proof, maybe because the people who perform those acts are usually people in power who are really respected and loved a lot of times. I think that it's a difficult thing for people to come to terms with. So let's say this is a hot topic, but like Bill Cosby, who was the young people may not really know him, but he was very well loved by the entire world, and he gets accused of sexual assault. And there are a lot of layers to that, is it real? There are a lot of questions that come up. Are those women making it up, but are some of them also telling the truth? And so I think that there are a lot of questions, but one of the main things is that he was loved. And so it's hard for people to believe that somebody they loved and respected did something wrong, especially when there's not physical proof. And what can be done? I think that we can have conversations about it among ourselves and just improve awareness that this stuff happens and support the people who go through it. Just because it's so common. It's so common. I think something like 1 in 6 women get sexually assaulted. And recently I was reading something like 1 in 3, depending on the definition, So anyway, that's all I have to add for now.
Okay.
Maybe, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dr. Salma.
I think as Dr. Nyanan said, I think it's about creating a safe space. It's a very delicate subject, as you can have, boys, girls, women, and men that may have been sexually abused or assaulted by members of their own family. And so because of the delicate intricacies of that, they may be scared to approach their family member or their parents for fear of not being believed, or sometimes they're bullied, or sometimes they are threatened that if they say something, that something will happen. So I think, one, making it more normal to talk about this regularly in your household, can help. Having forums like this also does help.
Yeah, the reason why I felt it's important for me to talk about this, I think one of the reasons is also because we are in a male-dominated society. And unfortunately, that's where the rules come from. And the men, even though can also be sexually abused, it's not something that happens to many men. A young lady called me years ago, we hadn't even said Agape yet, and she said she was sexually abused by somebody. The first person she called was her dad. And her dad was, how did you put yourself in that situation? And called her a prostitute. Next, she called the police. Because she felt so dirty, she threw everything away. The police said, no evidence, we can't do anything about it. And the policeman just left, and the expression on the face just shows like, oh, yeah. And then they left. Then after she called me, it was in a church setting. So I told the church leaders that, no, we have to do something about this. And then when the case was called, they brought the guy and the girl in, and I was in there too. And I noticed that the whole panel listening to it were men. And the girl was the only female in the room. And what the guy did was that the one who was being accused was that he was questioning her to give intimate details of what happened. And she started crying. So I stepped in and said, no, let's stop this thing. This is not working. God, it's all men here. If there were women here, they would probably have gone to comfort her and tell her to, and encourage her. But men were all sitting down looking at her face like that. So I stopped the whole thing. And when it also, the whole thing ended, nobody in the room reprimanded the guy except me. Later on, I talked to him and he thanked me for what I did. But what he told me was that the young lady told him to bring her some medication. She was having a headache, and she assumed that because she invited him, she had that in mind. And that's one thing I try to get across to young men. Let me address a young man to cut down sexual abuse. Men need to understand this. The fact that a young lady likes you, is fond of you, does not mean she wants to have sex with you.
Say it again.
Just need a big brother they can talk to.
Yeah.
Some of them just need a father figure. Some of them just need even a little brother figure, a male. Some women just like dealing with men. So the fact that she invites you to her apartment when she's alone does not mean she wants to have sex with you. And normally they won't do that unless they feel safe with you. So don't betray the trust. It's very, very important. And let me say this, I know our time is running out. There's a young lady I hired on a job. very beautiful young lady. When I had her, my boss remarked that I have hired a very pretty one. And I noticed for a period, every day she wants to go to lunch with me. I was like, why? When I'm in long meetings, she'll be waiting. Have you been to lunch? No. Where are you going? I want to go with you. And then one day, a friend of mine came to ask me if I was dating her. And I'm like, no, I'm married. I can't be dating my subordinate also. Then he said, well, I told her I wanted to go. Every time I said I want to go to lunch with her, she says that she's going with you. So I thought that you guys had something going. So I confronted her. She told me that when she started working there, every guy wants to go to lunch with her and hit on her. So because I was the only one she would go to lunch with and not get hit on, that's why she likes to hang out with me. Very simple. Nothing sexual, because she feels safe with me. I hope you get the picture. So that young lady who is always calling you, talking to you, inviting you out, come, let's go here, is because she feels safe with you. So please don't abuse the trust. That's all I'll say. Thank you.
All right, guys, this is just introduction. We really appreciate Dr. Okasi, Dr. Samuel, Dr. Eno. We really, really, really do appreciate you. I hope, we'll be calling on you, because once we get off, there'll be calls coming in. And, I know your schedules are kind of so tight, but please come back, because we have to do this again. There's so many questions that we couldn't get to. And the Youth Department of Agape wants to let you know they really do appreciate you coming on tonight. So thank you so much, Dr. Eno, Dr. Samuel, and Dr. Okasi. Pastor George, thank you so much for giving us this platform. If you have any parting message for our young people, please do that. And then,
well, knowing Dr. Okasi says she has some slides. I wish we had seen it. I sent you a message, but it seems you didn't see it.
Dr. Okasi, please forgive me. Everything, but we're going to have you back on, please. So we'll let you know, and we'll find out when you're available, and then we'll set it up. So,
well, I wanted to take advantage of the professionals in the church, Dr. Okasi, Dr. Eno, and all the other doctors. And I'm glad we've got them. Doctors, their time is worth a lot. And the thing is that for those of you who know anything about HMOs and health insurance, these are all specialists. So what, if your global copay is $10, you go to these guys, they charge you $40. So what you've got here is very, very special, and getting them to spend this time with you is a lot of knowledge, a lot of information. And I want to encourage us, and for young people, please talk to doctors. Don't believe what you read on the internet only, because sometimes you don't know who is behind it. If you're a young girl, you don't have an OBGYN, find one and have conversations with them, because your bodies are very, very different. Men, we're a little simple, but even the guys, I know this COVID vaccine is coming up. There's a lot of information on the internet and so on, but please, if you are not sure, talk to a doctor. That's why we like to bring them on. A doctor has a license. If they give you bad information, you don't want to hear this, but you can always sue them. So information from them is safer. So let's make sure the information we are getting is true. If you're a young lady, don't listen to the young man trying to tell you. One lady was telling me, a young guy said, if you don't allow him to have sex with you, he will have prostate cancer. Please, it's all not true. So let's make sure our information is solid. Check with people, and you are surrounded by very good people in Agape who can give you very good information. Sometimes people come to me because I'm a pastor. My background is not medicine. I'll refer you to a doctor. Sometimes I call Dr. Eno, I call Dr. Okasi, and I ask them questions also, so I can pass it on to you. So let's take advantage of the resources we have. And I thank Dr. Samuel also for coming to help us with this. Thank you very much for coming. And the young people also for being here, for listening.
Dr. Samuel is family, so she knows.
Yes.
So on behalf of the youth and the young adults of Agape, I just want to say a big thank you to all of you and all those who zoomed in. Like I said, this is just the intro. So just look out. We'll be coming out with another flyer, and just make time to join us. Till then, please stay safe out there. Take care of yourself. Love God. Peace. Bye.
Thank you. God bless you.